Coming up on All About Android, we've got Andrew Martonik from Android Central joining me, Ron, and Ant. We're going to talk about Android 11 Developer Preview 2 that released days ago. Galaxy S20 is finally getting a much-needed software update to address camera autofocus issues. Hands-on with the LG V60 ThinQ. Andrew actually has that phone. The Sooner, which is a little piece of Android history, went for sale on eBay, and I missed it. And I'm angry that I missed it. And a whole lot more coming up next on All About Android. All About Android is brought to you from LastPass Studios. You're focused on security, but are your employees? LastPass can ensure that they are by making access and authentication seamless. Visit lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This episode of All About Android is brought to you by LegalZoom. Make sure your important legal documents are complete with LegalZoom. Visit LegalZoom.com and enter AAA at checkout for special savings and see how they can help you. Hello and welcome to All About Android, episode 465, recorded on Tuesday, March 24th, 2020, your weekly source for latest news, hardware, and apps for the Android faithful. I'm Jason Howell.
And I'm Ron Richards.
And I'm Ant Pruitt.
Nice. With all the Skype lag, we still made it happen.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Jason, welcome back. It's good to have you on the show. We missed you last week, and this is the first time that I'm doing the show with you remotely and did not realize you've got the wonderful Yellow Gold Music album art frame behind you.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you I put out a couple of things on social media, but literally, like, the only place I have to podcast in my home is where I write music, which is actually downstairs. The problem is there's a whole wall that's exposed to the entire house, including the kitchen, first and foremost. And so I knew doing these shows that just wasn't going to work. And I didn't want to inconvenience my family and make them go upstairs and close the door in a bedroom. So I'm doing that. So I literally transformed like the corner of my master bedroom into a little podcast suite so I can close the door. My family can make all the noise they want downstairs and it doesn't matter. So I chose this art centerpiece.
It looks great. It looks great.
Thanks. I had to put something back there. Otherwise it just kind of looked like I was podcasting from a prison, you know. It's good to see y'all, and it's good to welcome back to the show Andrew Martonik from AndroidCentral.com. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing about as well as anybody else could be, I suppose. I appreciate being back on. I was trying to think when I was on last. It's been at least 3 years, maybe 4, something like that.
We can verify that.
Oh yeah, we have this information at our fingertips. October 18th, 2016.
He beat me.
All right,
4 years, far too long.
Which is what? Yeah, it really is far too long. I'm actually kind of surprised that it's been that long. That was episode 288. We're at 465 now. That's a crying shame. It's a crying shame, man. Yeah. We got to have you back more often.
But we're here now. We're reset the timer now, and we can just go from there.
What was the flagship phone back then?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Why don't we find out? All this stuff is really easy to figure out here. 288 is the episode number. It's going to take me a while to scroll through these tabs, but I can get there.
Well, October, would we have had the Pixel of that year yet?
288.
Yes, we would have.
Yes, in fact,
Pixel
the reviews are in.
The OG Pixel?
Yeah. This would be the original Pixel, yeah. The first reviews were just starting to come out.
Simpler times.
So that was what we led with that week. So, and I think, actually, when you were on that episode, you were on specifically for that story. Okay. You joined for that story. We also had Duncan Jaffrey from Osdroid.net. So you were on at the top to talk about the Pixel. So you were our Pixel news.
Right.
I still have my OG Pixel.
Yeah, I've got it.
It still looks good 4 years later.
Wasn't it called Quite Black or something? Some weird color like that?
Who the heck knows? They always gave them all weird names. They still do. But it's a classic. It started a tradition with Google. And
I like that phone.
Yeah, I liked it too. Let's see here. This week we've got a whole lot to talk about. And as I like to see this type of news in the top block. Android 11 Developer Preview 2, that's coming up right now after Victor plays this bumper and says things.
Except for Burke here in the studio, it's pretty lonely. Here's Android news.
Oh, that's so sad. But true. It is pretty lonely in the studio. It's pretty barren wasteland there these days. Android 11 Developer Preview 2 has released last week, actually, as seems to happen. I think it was maybe even the day or two after last week's episode. As far as changes are concerned, they've added a notification history, which is something that third-party apps have kind of filled the gap for in the past. Also kind of made some updates to the screen recorder that they added in DP1, kind of a new menu that allows you to select mic audio and show touches, that sort of stuff. Redesigned wallpaper selection UI. When you tap and hold on the home screen, it pulls up, the ability to set your wallpaper and stuff, and a clock customization section was added in there. They've redesigned how that looks. Conversations, which is a thing that keeps building out in these developer previews. It's kind of a section of notifications dedicated to the messages that you are sending with people in different apps, and it's going to end up in its own kind of block of notifications called conversations, and that's how you'll be able to kind of manage things like the floating bubble that they've added the functionality for, that sort of stuff. And then Face Unlock on the Pixel 4 now supports, I guess it would be support because it is an option that you can turn on or off. It supports the ability to require eyes to be open when Face Unlock is running.
What a crazy idea.
Yeah, wow, very strange.
Who came up with that?
Almost nobody was asking for that. Weird.
Almost feels like that doesn't need to be a setting. Like, wouldn't anybody want that? Is there any reason that you would not want that? What do you guys think?
Theoretically, it would slow down the process a little bit, but I can't imagine that it would really make that big of a difference. If you're somebody that cares about that sort of thing, wants that extra level of security, you're not going to care that it takes whatever extra fraction of a second. Because I don't know about you guys, every time I use the Pixel 4, Face Unlock is lightning quick. I could spare an extra fraction of a second to have it check if my eyes are open.
I don't know about you, but every time I go to unlock my phone with the Face Unlock, I'm usually wanting to look at the phone once it's unlocked. So what's the point of, I don't get it with people.
Right,
eyes closed, unlock my phone, done.
Well, it's funny because this is a use case that I actually, with Face Unlock, I turned off on my OnePlus 7 because when I turned it on, the little pop-up selfie camera would pop up every time I pressed the power button on the phone.
Right.
And so I just stopped using it completely. Yeah. So
that's a feature, Ron.
I know.
But it's neat when it does that. Come on. It's just a neat feature to watch that thing go up and down a million times a day. There are other features behind the scenes, a new 5G API for developers that will allow them, like developers, to identify what kind of 5G is happening behind the scenes and then maybe tailor a certain experience within their app to that particular connection. I guess we'll find out what that actually means in usage soon. A hinge angle sensor API for developers to know exactly where the hinge is on a particular foldable, and then be able to kind of work around that or maybe integrate with that better than it is right now. So that's, I suppose, probably a powerful tool. Probably developers want that kind of identification. There's also a new migration tool for developers who are bringing their apps over from legacy storage to the scoped storage approach. And actually, along the lines of scoped storage, I'm curious to know your take on this, Andrew, because I know there's been a lot of back and forth. Android 10 kind of introduced scoped storage early on and then took it back because developers were kind of upset that it was changing the paradigm so completely. And now we're kind of in a position where it's definitely going to happen. Do you think we're going to find ourselves in a similar situation this time, or do you think Google's doing it the right way this time around?
It seems like the changes they made with DP2 are, I hate to say that it's going to solve all the problems that people are going to have been complaining about, because anytime you change something as fundamental as how apps can access storage, whether it's read or write or both, depending on the usage of the app, developers are going to be angry because as soon as you put in a minimum API level and you have people target this, you have this there's always that straddling the barrier between you have all these legacy users and you have these new users that are a very small fraction, but their app may not work properly there on a very fundamental level. It seems like this migration tool is going to be able to make it a little bit simpler so that things don't just outright break in the meantime while developers, I guess, properly bottom up design their app for scope storage properly.
All right. It's a little bit of extra kind of hand holding through the process. I would
very
agree,
behind the scenes stuff that they're going to figure out while they're actually building their app. But it still manifests itself for people on the end of, we already have this very annoying thing now with this on use permission model where you're getting I don't know about you guys, but I feel like every time I set up a new phone, I'm remembering just how many times it requests that I get storage for this and then this inside the same app and then this inside the same app over and over again. This will hopefully help that along a little bit, because you're not just going to be requesting broad access to storage. You're just going to have your very specific lane in your scope that you can work in.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the security kind of emphasis behind it makes a whole lot of sense. Again, it just really kind of boils down to what does it do to the usability, and that's kind of what I think Google is doing here, is really addressing that in a better way versus last time. And developers have had a year to kind of get used to the fact that they're going to have to do this anyway, so it's not a surprise at this point. So at least Google's giving them a tool to kind of soften the landing a little bit. Apps are going to be able to set a preferred refresh rate for how their apps run. So if you're on a phone that has the ability of doing 60 hertz and 120 hertz, and maybe the app is only designed to do something at 60 hertz, I guess developers are going to be able to bake that in to say, all right, this is really designed for a 60 hertz display. And I don't know if that necessarily means it's going to be able to automatically switch the refresh in order for the app to operate properly, or how that's going to work, but that'll be there. And then also this last one, I'm curious on this, because the Android Flash tool, there are a few other features that I'm not talking about, but I thought this was interesting. The Android Flash tool was presented in January. This is a way to flash an OS update, in particular one of these OTA updates. They're starting it with Android 11 Developer Preview 2 through the Chrome browser. So you could do this on your PC. You don't have to install any extra, ADB tools or anything like this. It's supposed to be purely facilitated through the Chrome browser and switching a couple of settings on your phone, and which is really neat. They're adding it to this because you can't update to Developer Preview 2 through the automatic beta channel the way you will be able to in a couple of months. Right now, it's still a manual process, but adding in the support for the Android Flash tool makes it at least a little bit easier to do this. In my experience, though, I tried this with my 3A XL. I tried it with my 4 XL. I tried it on my MacBook, my Chromebook, a different MacBook, swapped out cables. I could never get it to complete. I could never get it to actually work. And I don't know, it was just kind of a bummer.
You always have the real when you're dealing with that thing.
What's that, man?
You always sounded so thrilled when you were dealing with that.
I mean, it is what it is. At least in theory, it's easier now than it used to be. But I
used it and was super stoked about it because it worked on my Pixel 3 and my MacBook first try without even thinking about it. I have to admit, I completely missed the news of this being announced because it didn't work at the time. It was just a theoretical tool, and it didn't start working until Dev Preview 2. And I clicked on the link, and it just automatically loads the proper URL that gives it all the parameters to flash properly. Plugged in my Pixel 3 and click, and it just went through, downloaded, and did it in 15 minutes.
That's the dream right there.
Sounds magical.
Didn't work like that for me. And I'm telling you, I was actually creating an episode of Hands on Android because I was like, hey, hallelujah, let's tell more people about this. And it got all the way through the, writing the episode and everything, got to that point, and I got stuck. Like, I can't record the episode because it can never finish the thing. And so I don't know. I don't know that it's on my end because I've tried a number of different configurations and devices to try and make it happen. So anyways, maybe it is.
I think the big thing on that is that it's ultimately still doing the same process. It's basically just all happening in the background, much like I'm sure, throughout our days of flashing ROMs and things, we've dealt with issues with these flash all scripts or these tools that are supposed to do everything automatically. It's still doing the same stuff in the background. So there are plenty of ways that it can stumble and, fall over. And I know a lot of my colleagues that were trying it on Windows machines had lots of issues with disconnects and things. So I may have just gotten super lucky and got the best possible experience, but I really appreciated not having to do the separate downloads and the platform tool update and all that when I'm just jonesing to get the new dev preview.
Totally. Now, have you played around with the dev preview too? And if so, what do you think?
Only a little bit. The one thing that stood out to me, well, two things. For the future, the hinge state, it sounds like very obscure right now, but when you think about these crazy things like that trifold TCL concept that I got to use a couple of weeks back, you think about things like that where the software has no idea what's going on with this thing that can be 4 different screen sizes. Like, you need to be able to know where the hinge is to know where to flow the software. Like, that's a cool thing for the future. But right now, just the notification history is actually just the stupidest little thing. But the number of times that I've accidentally dismissed all my notifications, just like fat fingering it when I'm trying to, just empty one and not having any idea what's going on with those 20 notifications I just dismissed. I just want to go see the history.
Yep. I completely agree. It's one of those, like, why hasn't this been here sooner? This makes perfect sense to have this embedded in. And they make it really easy to get to, too. It's literally at the bottom of your notifications list, just a little history button. A little buggy. Sometimes it disappears, but you just tap it and boom, you get your history, at least for the given day. So it's a pretty neat feature, and I'm happy that it's there. Ron, there's more.
Yeah. Oh, there's always more. And the great thing is that every time we get these developer preview releases, there's always little things hidden in the code that could possibly give hints to what's coming down the road. And of course, the fine folk over at XDA are always up for that sort of investigation. So here's a quick rundown of the things that appear to be coming to Android 11. Based off that under the hood view of the code by XDA. So call recording support likely to be coming into dialer apps. There was a string access _call _audio that enables record or play audio and telephony calls. So interesting, native call recorder. Play Bluetooth audio to 2 different sources and also switch between Bluetooth and wired audio, which is pretty cool for you Bluetooth audio users and things like that. The screen recorder might support internal audio recording, which is really interesting when you think about, recording videos and things like that off YouTube or whatnot. Resizable picture-in-picture windows, which, trust me, I'm doing a lot of casting from my phone to Google Home devices with YouTube with songs to keep my kids entertained. And sometimes I would really like to make that YouTube window smaller or larger, and making it resizable would be lovely. This is a neat thing. The ability to double tap on the back of the phone to do things such as screenshots, open recent apps, etc. Another neat little kind of usability hack, which I'm very curious about. I want to see how that works out. And then quick control shortcuts being added to the power menu for controlling smart home devices like lights, in a move of integrating Android closer and closer to the smart home and the Google Home apps, and making your phone, kind of that accessible dashboard for your devices. So some interesting things being added. And of course, as we've seen, it doesn't mean it's going to make the final release, right? I mean, we've seen things, be under the hood and then disappear from the final release or never come to fruition or might not be ready for prime time. But these are pretty interesting. Some interesting stuff. Which one of these do we think actually will totally make it as a lock for Android 11? I think it's call recording.
See, I'm torn on the call recording and then the screen recorder being able to record internal audio. Like, I could see call recording being something that could happen because, although it is illegal to record calls in certain places, as long, if you haven't explicitly told the person on the other line, that is a possibility. So maybe Google would be leaning into the fact that people would still be choosing to do that. But a screen recorder supporting internal audio recording, like, that's something that right now you can only do with root capability with root access on phones, and that's specifically to, or at least partially to curb piracy, like people ripping music streams and stuff like that. So I guess think
there are lots of media apps that would really not like that to be the case.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I don't know. I have AZ screen recorder, and
so do I.
I've done like a screencast of a YouTube video on my channel to where I could put it back out on, say, like an Instagram story or whatever. I would record that screen and then do some post-processing in like Adobe Rush or something. And I seem to recall being able to hear the actual audio of what I was recording on the screen.
What I'm guessing, it could be two things. One,
seems like I've done that anyway.
If you're rooted, which I can't remember if you've rooted any of your devices. Okay. If you are, a lot of these apps have special root functionality that enable those features, but you're not. AZ Screen Recorder is the app that I use and will use until Android 11's native screen recorder is released. And it has the ability to record audio, but it's through the microphone. What I'm guessing is happening, it's just a guess, is that the audio is playing through the speaker, coming back into the microphone. And yeah, it's capable of doing that. It's not a perfect one-to-one copy of the audio.
Not high fidelity, but it's still recording audio. Huh.
Yeah,
totally. Think about that.
And this would be like true digital duplication, if it's recording it inside the device.
But I mean, according to the courts, you would still be infringing on copyright, right? If you recording high quality versus low quality, nobody cares if it's not yours. It's not yours, right?
That's true. It's a good point. I wonder what the differentiation there is then, because I mean, the audio, if you're recording from the microphone out into a room, like there are a lot of ways that sound changes, you still hear the source audio.
Yeah, you still
but
hear
it's
it.
Not an identical, like I would not choose to listen to an album that had been recorded in a room through a microphone coming out of a speaper, unless it was set up to be perfect. Yes, exactly. That's really bootlegging. There was a time when I would totally do that. Now I think my standards are a little different. So yeah, it's a good point though. There's probably a little bit of a difference there, and I don't know why.
I could see the phone call recording being implemented because of Google Voice. It was already baked into Google Voice. Why not just go ahead and bake it into the OS?
Good call. Yeah, it's kind of already in Google's DNA at that point. That's a really good point. So it'll be another month, and we will see the next developer preview. And then I think the month after that, 2 months from now, is when we get to the official beta part of the schedule. And
where you can just click and sign up for OTAs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. It'd be much easier. Probably at that point, I will be less hesitant to install it on my daily driver on my Pixel 4 XL. I'm using a 3A XL to do these developer previews right now. But I mean, even in my usage of the 3A, using these updates, I'm not finding a whole lot of buggy things. But again, I'm not relying on it as heavily as I do on my daily drive.
And as far as I can tell, 11 isn't looking to be a game changer, right? I mean, like, yes, there's some interesting things coming from it, but it's not going to change the way we use our phones, right? It's another one of these kind of iterative, the next year, next release, here's some more stuff, right?
Yeah, I feel like we said that about the last 2 or 3. It's kind of like, I do too. A little bit, it's harder and harder to impress. But I will say what I'm seeing out of the Android 11 developer previews, both of them, is a focus to some degree on notifications. It really seems like they're doing a lot on the notification side of things. There's a functionality where you can flag a conversation as important, and then anytime a new conversation comes in inside of that messaging thread, it's bumped to the very top of your tray, your system icon tray up at the top, and their avatar is the icon that shows up in your status bar. So cool. you can glance at your phone and be like, oh, there's Ron's face. Ron sent me a message because I marked that as important and I want to know about that immediately. So they're doing a lot of work around that.
You might not want to see my face though. That's the problem with it. Depending on what the message is, yeah.
I mean, only if you're wearing Google Glass. That wants your face status bar.
I will say, by
the way,
like what they're doing with Android 10's notifications. They're doing a really good job of the prioritization and being able to snooze and have, high priority, low priority, like what alerts you, what doesn't. They've messed up notifications for a really, really long time with the number of options you've had. But this is actually building on that and giving you like a practical use case for it, where you would, doing it on a conversation basis or a person basis is like the holy grail of that priority ranking.
Absolutely. You could say anything that comes from this person, I always want to know about it above and beyond,
no matter what.
Over anything else. That's the most important thing. Yeah, that would be one reason why you would want to use that feature. Very, very handy. So we'll see where that goes. Ant, you got the next one.
All right. So I know we have all been practicing safe social distancing and staying at home and being safe. And me, I like to go outside and just, take my camera and shoot with my wonderful Pixel 4. And I started thinking, what if I had a Galaxy S20 and I went out there to try to shoot and the dadgum camera would just continue to fail and give me blurry shots? I would be pretty angry about that. Well, according to the folks at Android Central and our esteemed guest, Mr. Andrew.
Heard of him.
There's an update that's starting to roll out now for those folks with those expensive Galaxy S20 phones that's going to fix the autofocus issue that's been happening with the cameras. Now, this is only currently confirmed with the Exynos powered S20s, but eventually we'll start to hit the US phones here very, very soon. That's the S20 and the S20 Ultra, as well as the S20 Plus.
Yeah, I was just checking for update on mine. No go on my Ultra, which is the one that needs it.
Yes,
I would say, I don't know about nobody, but basically nobody's complaining about the focusing issues on the S20 and S20 Plus because it has more of a traditional 12 megapixel camera, but it's just this new 108 megapixel camera on the Ultra that's doing this 9:1 pixel binning that doesn't use dual focus pixels like the other ones do. That seems to have this trouble with the focusing. I never really had a massive issue with it. I noticed it hunt a little bit more than other phones, but there are a lot of people where, just in their usage, it just really struggles to lock on, especially in video, which is kind of, where you would notice this the most, continuous autofocus in video.
That's what I heard most of the complaints about. I didn't hear much complaining about it from a still standpoint. It was always people that were shooting video that talked about what you just mentioned, was it just continued to sort of hunt for the subject during the video. And that could be so annoying to you as the shooter as well as to the viewer.
Oh, it's weird. Even more so to the viewer, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a kind of a shot by shot comparison between the Pixel 4 XL and the S20 Ultra on Hands on Tech last week. And that's what I found in video recording, just 4K video and of course 8K video, which you can record on the S20 Ultra. I was in this like open scene outside doing this slow kind of pan across the scene, across this kind of pond area or whatever. There was nothing coming in and out of the frame, nothing like that to really throw it off. Yet every 2 seconds, it would clinch and then go back and clinch and then go back. And it was just really distracting, especially when you're talking about 8K video and kind of what we would do with 8K video if any of us had any equipment to actually support 8K video. Someday we will. But yeah, it's an important update, definitely something that they needed to address because it's really obvious when you're seeing it on a big screen just how distracting it can be.
Mr.
And
Howell,
it seems very...
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Andrew.
No. I think it's actually related to what the 108 megapixel camera is doing in stills, though, when the biggest thing that I noticed with it is it's such a big sensor, relative to smartphone sensors, and such a wide lens that it actually has a really shallow depth of field to start with. So anytime when you're taking photos, you get amazing natural blur in the background. You never need to use portrait mode on that phone because the blur is so good. The problem with that is that you can accidentally get really out of focus photos if it locks onto the wrong part of the frame. And even if it's just off by a little bit, the part that your eye is drawn to, what to be the foreground would be completely out of focus, even though the phone actually did lock and find focus just on the wrong point. So I really am confused as to why Samsung made its autofocus so aggressive and made the minimum focal length so close, when it really could, especially in like Jason's example for that video, just set the focus to infinity all the way out there. You don't need to be hunting for autofocus at all. I mean, I know Ant knows exactly what this is all about.
Yep. Yeah, when I was watching your Hands on Tech, Mr. Howell, I was thinking, okay, maybe it was an issue with just the actual trees and stuff that was moving around, and it decided to lock on to that. But then I was like, no, I don't think it's that simplified. It's something going on behind the scenes that's really screwing that up. But also, I want to say I mentioned this a couple episodes back that I have a f1.8 lens around here for my camera somewhere, and I hardly ever shoot in f1.8 just because it's so hard to lock on focus, and that's with a larger sensor in a DSLR body. Now, you imagine having that same capability with these smartphones. It's ramped up exponentially to try to lock on focus when you have such a wide open aperture with the shallow depth of field, as Mr. Andrew was pointing out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It was a challenge on some of the pictures that I was taking with the S20 Ultra to like find that sweet spot, depending on what you were taking pictures of. If it was like a flower or a cluster of flowers or something, it's individual choice of what to focus on and what to kind of leave a little blurry actually ended up being very stylistic. But if you're taking a picture of like a dog's face as one example, and that focus area just it's almost like it softens too early on the curves of the face. You know what I mean? And so it's a little distracting. So I'm happy that they're pushing out the update. I'm expecting that it'll make a big improvement, but I guess
has to show up now. That's all I need.
Just has to appear, and then we'll use it. Will it be your daily driver is the next question that I have for you, Andrew.
Oh, the Ultra's too, honestly, it's just too big for me. Yeah, the S20 Plus is my size, and the thing is, the drop off in battery life to the S20 Plus is not that severe, and the drop off in zoom quality is not that big of a deal for me anyway. And I think that the main camera is effectively the same from shot to shot. I mean, if you throw out any focus issues or whatever, I think it's basically the same. I'm much more in the S20 Plus camp. The Ultra is really great, but yeah, it's just too big for me, and I have an even bigger phone in my pocket right now. We'll talk about later, but yeah, not my preferred size. Barely fits in my pocket.
Did you have much of a use for the super zoom on that camera?
Well, the problem is that the quality is just not very good once you get past about 15x. And I had a separate editorial about this after my review came out, about saying that the 100x is basically just useless. Everything past 50x is useless. So the fact that they print 100x space zoom or whatever it's called on the back is really just a pure marketing, message that I'm just not a big fan of. So if I'm only going to shoot at 15x or so anyway, and I got some really good shots at 10 to 15x, like they're really good, best zoom photos I could get on a phone. The drop off in quality on the S20 or S20 Plus is just not that noticeable at 10 to 15x, even though 15x is really like the top of the top for the S20 Plus. I think it technically goes to 30. Don't bother with that. But
don't try it. Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that it drops off so dramatically on either phone just shows you that you don't need to be going up there. And if I can get 10x, and that's way ahead of what, even like great zoom on the Huawei P30 and even the Pixel 4 XL, can do by a long shot, I can live with that to get, a smaller phone day to day.
Nice.
Yeah, the S20 Ultra is just a beast of a phone, and I've used a lot of large phones, but that is officially a phone that is just too large for me. Like I can't.
And I use it in a case too because it's so big and slippery. So of course you add more to it by putting the Samsung case on it, and then
Holy cow! That's literally a brick in your pocket at that point.
Good grief, man.
But it is a super slick phone, like slippery.
Yeah.
So, yeah, important. All right, let's take a break and thank the sponsor, and then we will get back and talk about a bunch of new hardware, some very interesting relics from the past. That's coming up. But this episode of All About Android is brought to you by LegalZoom. Taxes. Yes. Isn't it great? We're there. It's one thing we all have to deal with around this time of year. As a business owner, it's critical to know all of your options. That's why you should lean on LegalZoom. Now, personally, the thing that I love about LegalZoom is, frankly, how easy it is to do these things that you might be putting off because maybe you're afraid that they're going to take too much time, they're going to be too difficult, might be even outside of your wheelhouse. So LegalZoom is all about taking those hurdles, making them achievable for you. We did our living trust. And when we did that, my wife and I, we were amazed at how easy it was. We were able to have some peace of mind that it was finally checked off of our list where it had been for quite a while before using LegalZoom because we assumed it was just a difficult process. So LegalZoom helped us through that. And if you have a small business, they're going to help you through the things that you need to do as well. LLCs, DBAs, S-Corps, they all mean different things when it comes to paying taxes specifically and limiting your personal liability. That's there's just a lot to think about. But with LegalZoom, you don't have to worry about doing all the legwork yourself to find the right answers. They have a ton of resources to help, including their network of independent attorneys and tax professionals. They'll provide the advice that you need to ensure you're operating your business the way you want to. And since LegalZoom is not a law firm, you're going to save time and money while avoiding hourly fees. Whether you need to incorporate, form an LLC, or set up your business another way, you can use LegalZoom to maximize your business's potential and make your accountant happy. So to get your business on the right track for 2020, go to LegalZoom.com today and enter promo code AAA in the box at checkout for special savings. That's LegalZoom.com, promo code AAA. LegalZoom is where life meets legal, and we thank LegalZoom for their support of All About Android and the TWiT network. Thank you, guys. All right, with that, it's time for some hardware.
All right, my friends. Well, last week we talked a little bit about the LG V60, and just a quick refresher on the actually full name, LG V60 ThinQ. Is that how you say it?
ThinQ.
I never know, so it's not just me.
It's technically ThinQ, but nobody should ever say that word.
So it's like ThinQ as in like thank you, thank you. I don't know. Thank you.
I think that's what they're going for. Yeah.
Nice.
So I see what you did there.
There you go. So the
I didn't
V60
deserve the bell, but thank you.
The LG V60 ThinQ 5G. It's on sale in the US. A quick refresher: it's got a Snapdragon 865 with 5G. It's got 8 gig of RAM, 128 gig of storage, a headphone jack. All you people out there, and a micro SD card slot for all you old timers. 6.8-inch POLED display with dual screen attachment display. Starts at $799 in the US, $799. Andrew, you have the phone and you've been posting photos on Twitter. You've referenced it tonight so far. So what is the LG V60 like in real life?
It is wider and taller than the S20 Ultra, which we were just talking about being way too big, which is kind of crazy. I think you can't get past the size of this thing. So with a 6.8-inch display, it's just crazy. So it's 6.8 inches, but there's no curvature to it like the S20 Ultra. So you have pretty big bezels around the sides, and they don't do anything to hide them. And then from that point, it still has kind of this old school looking design a little bit. It's kind of Galaxy S9-ish, I guess you'd say. It's just very squared off on the sides, slab across the back. They're not doing anything to kind of make it feel svelte at all. So even without a case on, it's just really tough to wrap your hand around this. But of course, the upside is you're getting that massive display and you get a huge battery, 5,000 milliamp hours, same as the S20 Ultra. But you get all the extras too. So they really didn't cut anything back. LG has gone back and forth, just cutting things here and there, but they still give you really good stereo speakers. You have the headphone jack, like you said. You still have SD card slot, water resistance, and of course the giant battery. And that battery is giving me way better battery life than the S20 Ultra even. Even at 60 hertz on the Ultra, this thing beats it. Like on the weekends when I'm just, spending a lot of time around the house, obviously on Wi-Fi, I'm going to bed with like 50% battery left, which is absolutely crazy on a modern smartphone that still has all the highest end specs. I think that the downside here is LG's software. It feels old. It feels like nobody's really gone over it with a fine-tooth comb and like spruced it up and modernized it a little bit. I think the best example of that is the launcher, where you can't pull down on the home screen to pull the notification shade down, which is just completely random. How do you not do that? The app drawer doesn't stay sorted alphabetically. Also, so you add a new app and it goes to the very end. It doesn't go.
I hate that approach. I hate that. It's the worst.
They let you do folders in the app drawer as well, and they get all messed up. And just everything looks very 2017-y, 2016-y. It feels very old. So that's kind of the problem, is LG software feels old. It's already a month behind, almost 2 months behind now on the security patches. And we know LG's history with software updates is a little sketchy. I think that's the big thing you're giving up, because, I'm open to any other questions about it, of course, but I think the other thing I'd say is the cameras are actually pretty good this year, but you have no dedicated zoom lens and you have no OIS on the wide angle camera. So you're just basically getting a 64 megapixel camera that bins 4:1 to 16 megapixels and an ultra wide, and that's it. It takes good photos, but it's not doing anything fancy like Samsung or Google's doing in terms of processing or making the most of that sensor.
So you're saying their AI isn't necessarily up to snuff from a photography standpoint?
No, they're really not trying to do anything fancy. And I was talking to one of our video producers, Hayato, who also has one, is doing our video review. And we were saying we actually kind of like that it's not trying to do something that it can't. It really just does. It gives you a good balanced photo. It doesn't blow out all the colors. It doesn't have this issue that Samsung has with going way overboard on HDR and like putting halos around things with bright backgrounds and blue skies. Yeah. The real downside there is that it doesn't have the real sharp, fine detail that you get in Pixel photos or in Samsung photos. You zoom in and you see everything's a little muddy, a little soft, but you can add some sharpness later. You can bring up the brightness and the saturation later if you want to. But in the case of Samsung, if you take that photo and it just chroma noises the crap out of some fine details because it tries to over sharpen them, you can't bring that detail back. So there is an argument for saying, if you don't think your AI can, process this and do a better job, just give them kind of a basic photo and let them go from there. And fundamentally, the photos are really good.
I'm of the camp that I was the person that automatically turned off the HDR plus feature in the Pixel camera app. I think that's what they just call it, Pixel camera, because I didn't necessarily want Google telling me to bring up the shadows in all of my images. Sometimes I wanted those dark shadows. So hearing something like this about the LG camera app is fine by me, but I get it that the masses are probably going to want something a little more popping and saturated the way Samsung does, even though it does have some of those other limitations.
Yeah, and look at what Samsung gives you is, it bumps up the highlights, it bumps up the shadows, and it bumps up the saturation. Like, it just gives you a brighter, poppy image that, isn't like reality whatsoever. But, that's kind of how people were going to edit it anyways. But I think that if LG tried to do the same thing, we would get worse photos than what it's offering right now by just giving you kind of this standard processing. Like, I just think of it as when you pull in a RAW into Lightroom or something like that and you just hit auto on it and you spit out a JPEG, like that's basically what it's giving you. And the fundamentals on the sensor are good enough that, you're getting something good. But like I said, the downside is zoom camera, and so all you're doing is just digital zooming on this 64 megapixel sensor. So even 2x zoom is kind of sketchy, and everything else beyond that is just useless, because you at those levels you really need processing and lots of AI assistance to make digital zoom look good, and they've got none of that.
Yeah, that makes
Fascinating.
sense. What about the dual screen thing? Have you been a fan of LG's approach to?
I was afraid you were going to ask me.
This might be biased in his response, though. So hang on.
I have the attachment. It's just this giant case thing. Okay, so if you agree with this stance that you can, instead of doing a foldable or like something like Microsoft Duo where it's, attached all the time, if you agree with this stance that you can add and remove a screen as you need it, it does about as well as it can do. It plugs in over USB-C. There's no extra battery, so it doesn't add any more weight than just a case and this panel. It's just a dead panel otherwise. It's the exact same panel as in the phone, so there's no issue with calibration or color balance or anything like that. It even has the same notch cutout at the top, even though there's no front-facing camera on that side, obviously. So it is perfectly mirrored, and the software does work as intended. You can span apps across the two, either vertically or horizontally, and you can run two separate apps however you want. And you can open and close on both screens. You can put, you can rotate it and put the second screen on the right or the left, top, bottom, doesn't matter. So it does work as intended. The problem is the size of the thing. This phone is already really big, and you add a second screen to it that adds another, 100 grams or something to it. And now it's unwieldy, it's heavy, and it makes it really hard to justify carrying the thing for the times when you're not using that screen. Of course, it folds over to the back. It's gone, it turns off and all that. But all the time that you're not using it, you're just lugging this massive thing around.
Yeah.
Does the second screen have a notch as well? Victor, can you go back a photo?
Yeah. It has a notch and no because it is literally the same panel. They just pulled two panels off the assembly line, and they, one could end up in the second screen, one could end up in the phone. And it is it is a really good panel. I'd say it's LG's best so far. It's not Samsung quality because nobody is, but it's pretty darn close. And the fact that you get an extra one, so it's at Verizon and AT&T, it's included. At T-Mobile, it's not. And so T-Mobile's $100 less. So you can value this thing at $100. There's no way they're making any money throwing the additional one in there for $100. It's got to cost them more than that in terms of all the overhead and everything. But that's why I'm recommending to people, we can cut to the chase, that like, if you want this thing, try to buy it at T-Mobile, because it's really worth it without the screen. Like, that's where the value shines on this thing, because we're talking about an $800 phone that in most respects is right there with the Galaxy S20 Plus, which is a $1,200 phone.
Wow. I gotta say, if this was an inch smaller, I would love that second screen idea as a case and all that sort of stuff. It just seems like it's a really interesting kind of use case and an interesting application. But the enormity of it seems to get in the way.
Yeah. The real problem there is that when they first introduced this, it was fully optional, and so nobody bought it, and so nobody used it. So it's kind of this thing where if they wanted anybody to try it, they had to put it in the box. And now, even if they've gotten to the point where 2 of the 3 carriers put it in the box, T-Mobile has a separate listing for the phone to buy it without. So, they understand that people care about $100 off more than they care about having this thing that they're kind of unsure about when, like I said, the value is all about the main phone and what it can provide. And like, just let me buy the second screen separately if I want to. Don't overcharge or undercharge depending on whether you take it. I think it's neat, but I mean, this is not aged very well in the world of foldable phones that look really cool and futuristic. Like that photo right there, shows what you're what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and just knowing, I shouldn't judge it, but knowing that it's like the same panel, but yet there's no camera there, it just kind of feels lazy. Yeah. Even though I realize it's probably a cost saving move. Allows them to get more of those display panels, at a lower cost by keeping it the same. But it's just kind of like
I love that. I love it. It's eccentric. It's wacky. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's perfectly imperfect.
No. At the quarterly meeting, someone come in from the warehouse. Hey, boss, we got a whole bunch of these screens. What are we gonna do with these screens?
What are we gonna do? Let's put it on a separate screen that attaches to it.
Throw them in the box. Something. Do something.
Get rid of it. How do you not celebrate that? That's a wonderful thing. So
true. They're using the resources that they have. So
they're trying stuff. Yeah, I think that the problem is that they, at some level, they had to have a software engineer to handle all of this, a whole team, I'm sure, to handle all this moving apps around and attaching the second screen.
True.
If they would have taken that team and just rewritten their entire launcher from top to bottom,
right.
That's $100 worth of value right there, because I have to stare at the launcher every single day, no matter what.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, Ant, you got the next one.
Oh, my goodness. Friend of the show, Ron Amadio over at Ars Technica, shares some big news from the folks at Xiaomi and their new flagship phone, air quote, flagship phone that's coming in with a unbelievable price point. That's under $500. That's the Redmi K30 Pro. This is a 6.7-inch screen, 2400 by 1080 display, running in a fast 60 hertz refresh rate. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that. 60 hertz is totally fine. You're going to get 6 gigs of RAM and DDR4 and 128 gigs of storage on this. And that's for the lower end. It's going to cost you roughly about $425 US. But you can get an upgraded model at $481 approximately US. It's going to have 256 gigs of RAM and, 256 gigs of storage, but you're still going to get the same 865 Snapdragon processor in there, and a very, very nice camera array showing off a 64 megapixel main sensor, 13 megapixel ultra wide, and a 2 megapixel macro camera, as well as a 5 megapixel telephoto. All of this sounds pretty dadgum good, except for the fact that this IP rating on it is just a little bit weak at IP53. So don't go out there dropping your phone in the toilet. Just try to keep it as dry as possible. Now, with this said, I appreciate the fact that the pricing is down. It just begs the question of, why are all of these other OEMs charging upwards of $1,000 for these devices when this one here is just, less than half of the price? How much money is Xiaomi going to lose on this phone if they're trying to push it out at that particular price point?
I feel like this is like at the core of what Xiaomi does. They release these phones with that are really impressive, and then totally surprised with the price. So somehow or other, they've built their business model around this. And I just saw news the other day that showed that Xiaomi has surpassed Huawei as far as kind of worldwide sales are concerned. So they're doing okay. Their strategy is working. What do you think, Andrew?
Xiaomi still has this very, very scrappy business model, even though it's not a small company anymore. But we can't confuse them for being the same size as Huawei or Samsung, or even, somebody like LG in terms of the great corporate conglomerate size that they are. Mm-hmm. And, that's the old thing. They pass the savings on to you. They're not marking these up 100% to be able to cover a bunch of costs and like the marketing and distribution and stores and support and all this kind of stuff that's very, very expensive. We have to also remember that Xiaomi doesn't ship globally. They're not fully supported globally. They have their markets that they do really, really well in, but they're not in every carrier store around everywhere in the world like a Samsung is. And, that's really, really expensive. All that overhead is very expensive. And Samsung obviously just has way higher expectations in terms of just gross margin on every single phone.
Now, Amadio mentions that there is a global release coming for this particular model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can buy their phones globally. Just don't expect to be able to, use them necessarily everywhere or get support for them everywhere in the same way that you could with Samsung. Now, for a lot of people, we were just talking about saving $100 by, people care about that, dropping the second screen off of the V60. If you can drop $400, $500 off, like maybe you're more willing to, put up with a bad or non-existent customer experience, customer support experience, if, you could save several $100s.
Yep. And the quality is good. These phones, they're always, it's pretty impressive when I've been able to check out a Xiaomi phone in person and just kind of see the translation between what you get from a hardware perspective and how much those materials cost compared to what we're used to here in the US. Is just night and day. It's just way different. You get so much more out of a Huawei device. Long-term support, I'm way less educated on that side of things, and that has a cost to it as well. So worth keeping in mind.
I think that the last part of it is I get a little bit, I understand a little bit better because we have a writer, Harish, in India who covers, the Indian market is just absolutely insane. I can't, fathom the number of devices that are coming out on a weekly and monthly basis there. But this is really tailored for that type of buyer, the Southeast Asian and Indian buyer that really cares about specs, really cares about price, and does not care about having their phone for very long because they're just going to be upgrading over and over again. And that's the cycle that Xiaomi is playing, and that's how this could be their high-end phone, because they have a lot of other really killer devices that are also in like the $200 range that also have very, very respectable specs that blow away like a Moto G or like a Nokia 5 level device. So for them, even though it's still a relatively cheap device, like it's twice the price of their volume play device, as it stands. And so it's just a completely different market. We don't we don't look at it holistically, because we just look at the crazy spec sheet and the price, but they have this whole range of other devices that they're trying to shovel out too.
Yeah. Man. Interesting stuff. All right. So this next story, man, when I saw that this had happened, and I immediately went over to eBay, and then I realized I was far too late because I didn't catch this news the second it broke. I will admit I was very disappointed and sad. Ron, you've got this one.
Yeah, this is what you get for going on vacation, Jason. This is what happens. You can't disconnect. But so we got a little Android history here. I think the next two stories could categorize by that. But for those of you who are longtime Android fans, do you remember the Sooner device? Yeah, I wonder if you do. The Sooner was I know Andrew does. It was Google's internally developed first version of the Android phone ever, and a bunch of these appeared on eBay for sale. Historically, for those who don't know, ultimately this was kept from release in favor of the HTC Dream for the launch, what we affectionately known as the G1, my first Android phone. And we always do the phone specs, so I want to share the specs for this phone so everyone's aware of what's in it. It has a TI OMAP 850, nice little Texas Instruments processor going on in there, a 64 megabyte of RAM. It's got a 320 by 240 display. I hope you're sitting down. A 1.3 megapixel camera. It had more than one megapixel. It had a 960 milliamp battery, 960, and it supported 2G mobile connectivity. And the phone had no touchscreen. It used a navigational rocker kind of in the middle of it, and it had no Wi-Fi support. It also has a physical keyboard, which was all the rage back then, thanks to BlackBerry. So if you were fast on the trigger finger and got onto eBay, you could have gotten one of these. for $200. And actually, Andrew, back in like 5 years ago, you got to play with one of these as part of your guys' history series, right?
Yeah, I actually got to go over. This is back when I was living in Seattle, and I got to go over to the T-Mobile offices, and they had several of them. I won't say how many. They had a lot of them because they were, they eventually launched with the G1, and so they were really tight with Google at the start, and they just have these things kicking around because they're really cool, and it just blows you away to put this thing looks ancient even next to a G1, which ended up being the launch device. Going from this little BlackBerry style, I mean, that's exactly what it was, a BlackBerry style device with the keyboard on the front, no touch screen, this ancient looking interface, and this really kind of demo looking hardware, to the G1 just several months later, where full touch screen, slide out screen, trackball, all that kind of stuff, completely different paradigm of what Android could be. Now, I don't think there's ever any sort of alternate reality where like the Sooner ends up being the pathway for Android, but it very well could have been something like that, delaying the availability of something like a G1 further had they not decided to can and pivot a lot sooner.
So I'm curious though, because does it say, can you go back to the eBay listing there, Victor, for those who are watching? Does it say where it's being sold from? So San Francisco.
It says San Francisco.
I was going to say, what are the, which is makes sense. It was probably from an ex-Googler. I was going to say, what are the odds that that these phones are coming from that T-Mobile cache in Seattle?
Because I used the white one, and there was a blue or a black one, I can't remember, bluish black color too. So they were, these weren't just prototypes in that sense. These were like, we're going to try to make a device like this, and it was a very simple interface, with the highlight the icon as you click around on the D-pad kind of thing, and dedicated call and end keys. It's just like, it seemed very, very old school. But like, this thing was developed in 2008. It's not that old. Like, the iPhone had already come out.
That's crazy.
Ryan Hager
I was just gonna say, if we want to see it in action, right?
Yeah, Ryan Hager at Android Police was quick on the trigger finger, so was able to buy it. Just got it delivered today, and so you can go to his Twitter feed. And you can even see in one video he peels the screen protector off of the display. So I mean, this sucker is like brand new, kind of thumbs around with little bit of
they were Android. Ready to go with this thing.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm so sad that I missed the opportunity to get this. I would love to have this in my Android kind of history corner of my office, but yeah, thank you. That's deserved.
It's so funny. I mean, like, and you mentioned that it was the, I mean, the G1 or the HTC Dream came out in 2008, but they were,
yes, this
Google
was 2007.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, this is at least, I mean, at latest 2007, but, they were, Google bought Android, in 06, 05 or whatever. So there was a couple of years of them doing this kind of development. And it's interesting to see I'd be curious, if someone writes the book on the history of Android and all that sort of stuff, the decision to go from, okay, let's make a BlackBerry killer to, oh crap, what is Apple doing? Let's compete with the iPhone, because that seems to be the real pivot point. Right. And then you move to the HTC Dream with its, with the touchscreen, but it still had the slide out physical keyboard. I love that phone. That phone was great. It was like such an interesting.
Is this the point where we thank Apple for bringing the iPhone?
Possibly.
Because it helped kick Android into gear and make Android as good as it could be?
Possibly.
We could be living in a BlackBerry universe still if Google had gone down this road and this had been the successful version.
It wasn't a true BlackBerry because it didn't have a jog wheel on the side, and you really need a jog wheel on the side if it was going to be at all good. And we were still, we were still well in that era with jog wheels on Windows mobile devices and on BlackBerries. Like, that was still the thing. And I think the one thing that the extra thing you can give Google credit for, on top of, yes, like Apple spurred that development, the real quick switch to touch, but you can give Google some credit for sticking with the hardware keyboard thing, doing things differently still. Like that use of the little Z hinge on the inside for the slide up, very sidekicky. Like that was still a novel, new thing. It would have been a lot simpler to not have that keyboard and just make a slab device that was just like a G1 closed.
Yeah, I mean, I do argue that the G1 was the bridge device between the BlackBerry / Sidekick era and the chocolate bar, single touchscreen device era. It definitely bridged the gap between the two. And it's funny because right here on this show 10 years ago, Jason, I remember, stomping my feet and going, I don't want a phone without a physical keyboard, and like, and praising the G1, and when the Nexus 1 came out, just like not understanding why they got rid of the physical keyboard and what is this trackball all about. And it's just amazing to see how in such a short period of time, in the span of 2 years, we really ended up with a form factor that is stuck to today. That up until a year or two ago, with the emergence of foldable phones, really stuck for a long time with the flat. We used to call them China phones. Like the rectangle all display. And sure, there were variations on whether it was titanium and metal from HTC or glass backs, and then we had the Samsung Edge, and you have little micro kind of evolutions, but still at the end of the day, it was just a black rectangle. So it's interesting to see how that form factor stuck for nearly a decade.
I'm curious to see just how long the foldable generation will stick around, because you see what LG is doing and Samsung and so forth, what they're trying to do with it, but that slab candy bar style is just still the go-to for many people. I don't know if it's a pricing thing or if it's just a functionality kind of thing.
Just the availability, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big time. Well, let's see here. We've also got a little bit of extra history in this block. Essential, if you remember, not very long ago, Essential went away for good. But there was the Essential PH2, the second phone, and then the PH3, the third phone, that were apparently, being developed and designed behind the scenes. A former Essential lead designer, Kevin Hoffman, shared images of the two prototypes that they never actually released. And I would say everybody really expected the PH2 at some point. We kind of thought that was going to come out. PH3 apparently was in the works as recently as earlier this year, slightly before the company went under. But the PH2 has a similar back to the PH1, but with rounded metal sides. So it kind of has a similar kind of aesthetic to it, but a little bit softer, a little bit rounder, more rounded edges. It addresses the fact that the PH1 didn't really have any dust or water protection. So it was going to be IP68 rated. And Kevin said the phone was super close to release. Andy Rubin killed it in favor of the Essential Home, which also never released, but had been teased, very at the same time as the first phone. So
I can't wait to read the book about Essential. I can't wait to read the book about Essential also when that comes out, and what a spectacular failure.
Yeah. I think that'll be more like a Kindle single kind of situation, not a book.
Yes.
I remember when the first Essential, well, I guess the only Essential phone was launching, and I went down to the Playground Global offices and saw all of the crazy designs that they were coming up with. And it was not unlike the design labs that I've been in for, LG and HTC and every other company that opens up the door just a tiny bit to show you that kind of stuff. But it was all kinds of crazy different form factors, and you could tell that they were trying new things. I think that they, as we all saw when we used, I think I have two of these things. I have a white one and a black one, which is crazy. That'll be on eBay later. And now that the company's folded, I'm sure. But that they put all of those cool design ideas and like the Essential Home and all of this kind of crazy stuff, this ecosystem stuff and the accessories way ahead of the getting the fundamentals right. And they were so late in the game that you can't get the fundamentals wrong. Even at that point, let alone now if you were trying to release the 2 and the 3 or whatever. I mean, we talked about how it was such an open playing field in 2007, 8, 9 with all these crazy form factors and things, and you could do crazy stuff. You can't do that anymore. You have to really nail all the basics. And we even have a situation, it's like LG does 95% of the basics right, and you're still like, is this really the right device? Because there's another phone here that's even better. Essential was not even at 80% of the basics, let alone 95. They still had issues with software crashing and missing, basic things like water resistance and all that kind of, and bad screens, bad cameras, all that kind of stuff, that we kind of held them up on the pedestal because they had all these cool ideas, though.
Yeah. Cool ideas. And, for better or for worse, probably for worse, we held him up on a pedestal because of Andy Rubin and kind of his history with Android. And of course, everything happened with him, with the sexual harassment allegations and all that kind of stuff that ultimately, has taken down his career with Essential. We're never going to see these phones again, but it's an interesting glimpse into what could have been if things had gone a little bit differently. And I wish that they had.
Beautiful objects, nonetheless.
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. That was what I always appreciated about what Essential was doing. They created in the first phone, they created kind of a phone that when you showed it to someone, it was kind of like, whoa, that's a really nice looking phone. That's, even though it is, yes, a black slab, but there was just something about it. The aesthetic was just so slick, so sharp. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but they got it right. They got the aesthetic.
I feel very similar about the Nextbit Robin. It was the same situation. Yep. I think that they got a lot more of the fundamentals right and had much lower expectations put upon them. So they were in a better position, all things considered, than taking in like $1 billion of investment and all this kind of stuff. But it was the same kind of thing. Beautiful object. Like, I love to just look at this thing, but why do I buy it? Right. Essential and Nextbit had the same problems. Essential just had a lot of people asking for money from them.
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with you. I would put Essential and Nextbit in the same categories, but for different reasons. With Essential, with all eyes on Andy Rubin and all that expectations and such a big kind of shadow of what he'd done before that. Putting the negative stuff aside, just focusing on the professional stuff at that point in time. But then at the other end of the spectrum, you had Nextbit, which comes out of nowhere, truly trying to differentiate and change both in design as well as in functionality with the whole cloud storage and backup and all that stuff. Just a new idea. And it was at a time when we weren't getting any new looks or new ideas. I mean, Jason, again, not to go back to our storied history, but remember that was right around the time when we were like, man, every phone looks the same. Mm-hmm. Like, and then Nextbit, right. And then Nextbit comes out and it got this mint green kind of design. Mm-hmm. That's why I fell in love with it, because it looked different. It just looked different than everything out there. And they really tried to do something different, but they had no expectation and they were underdogs. And so therefore,
that phone felt nice in the hands too, though.
Yeah, it felt really. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
which is an interesting metric to give to a phone. I remember how good that phone felt in my hand, but the Nextbit Robin did that. Like, it was a nice phone to hold on to.
When we're talking about alternate universes and like things that could have happened or should have happened, imagine if Nextbit had a third of Essential's funding and didn't need to sell the Razor and just continued on the path that they were on. Would have been interesting, but they got an opportunity and Razer bought them and they took the exit and in the Bay Area, that's how the game is played. Sure. I don't blame them for it, but man, like they were like, I remember going to the Nextbit office and like getting walked through the whole, the progress to the Robin and then what they wanted to do with the Robin 2 and all this sort of stuff. And like, they were really like, not to steal from Apple, but they were really thinking differently about this stuff. And, it's just kind of sad that it now is just gamer phones, but good for them. So
that's working for them. It's working for Razer. So
yeah.
Right.
All right. A couple of real quick stories in the app block. Let's get to it. Just following up on last week, I know that you guys, while I was out, you talked about how Zoom has become suddenly incredibly popular for video conferencing for people, and how many Android users have not been very happy, apparently, with what they're getting out of Zoom. Of course, it's hardly entirely Zoom's fault. Zoom was placed in a situation that any company would probably love to be in, which is that suddenly they had a rush of people that needed to use their service all at once. And so I think they're just having issues scaling, or at least that's my guess anyways. But so a number of people, like you mentioned, left 1-star reviews in the Play Store. Apparently something has changed, and Google hasn't acknowledged what exactly has happened. Android Police wrote about this and had, David Ruddock said, Google has not gotten back in touch with them as far as like why or what has changed, but the reviews have reversed. And, there have been a number of negative reviews that have been removed. So I don't know if Google is going in there and identifying like app reviews that may be following a certain, a certain pattern or something, bots, that sort of thing, or what they're doing. But it's back up to more of like a 4-star review territory, which prior to the corrections, it was heavily 1-star. Even though prior to all of this, it was right around 4-star. It had been reviewed pretty well. It's just a victim of the circumstance. Even though it's really good for business, they just found themselves in an impossible situation.
If they stepped in and filtered out the trolls or whatever, I'm fine with that. It's talk about a crazy kind of dog pile, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Does Google do
it's
this?
Also just,
do we know if Google does this on any other apps?
I don't know, but you imagine that they have to be doing something. They have to have a lot of people involved because apps even by big names like Zoom or the apps that Google puts out itself or Microsoft or Amazon, like these apps with tens of millions of users, they live and die by the reviews. And you even have this problem of you release one bad update and the score doesn't reflect what's happening right now necessarily. The score, that aggregate number, is reflecting the lifetime of that app. And if Gmail has released 17,000 updates in the last 10 years in the Play Store, it's all the way back to the Android market. You like, what are how are they weighting those things? I can't imagine that it's all equally weighted, but it's also very opaque.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. So things are being restored, and I suppose that's good for Zoom. And there you have it. And Ron, you have the other one.
Yes, I do. It's funny because last week when we were putting the show together, this is the story that I actually didn't include because we didn't run out of time. So I'm glad we got it in here, which is also important because I feel like it's one of those things that we always kind of circle back and talk about to our international audience and stuff like that. But Google Translate now offers live transcription of speech. So English, French, German, Hindi, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, and Thai. All you need to do is tap the transcribe icon, select the source and target languages, and tap the mic icon to start. And the transcription is kept for reference later. And this is just amazing technology, and it's an amazing thing that they can do now with language and translation, and helps for travel and just really taking this wide world and making it a little more accessible and smaller for everybody else around the world is really kind of fascinating. The stuff they do with text to speech and with language now, Google, is just amazing. So very cool.
It's close to magic.
Close to magic, indeed. Yep.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Cool. Without further ado, why don't we jump into the arena and talk about some apps that we like?
So many enter, but only one lives. Android Arena.
Last week in the arena, last week's guest, of course, Ben Schoen from 9 to 5 Google. And let's see here. The results are in. I'm trying to find it on my screen here. 48% for Filterbox. Who is Filterbox?
That was me.
Ron gets the win. Nice job, Ron. Filterbox is 48%. Second place is I Am. I think, was that yours, Ant?
That was mine.
Right on, 27%, and then third place, which was Ben's, Inware at 24%.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, very good stuff, Jason. You should check out Filterbox. It's quite powerful. I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. But that said, Wade County, thank you, sir, in the chat room for giving us the stats after 11 weeks. Jason, despite you missing last week being on vacation, you are in first place with 27 points. So good job. Guests are in second place with 25 points. Flo, despite being on maternity leave, is still in third place with 23 points. Although with that win, I caught up a little. I'm in fourth place with 22 points, and Ant is really the impossible challenge of Ant. Coming in late to the season with 16 points, but you never know what can happen here in the arena.
16 points. That's not too far behind.
I was just going to say, I'm actually pretty impressed. You've made up some good ground, Ant. You've done really well in a short amount of time.
So that said, Jason, since you missed last week, you will go first, followed by Ant, and then our good friend Andrew, and then I will wrap up. So
all right, and of course, I'm not in studio to show off apps and stuff, so I can't do that for y'all. So I think we'll if we have pre-recorded stuff, we'll play it. Otherwise, we're going to show kind of some of the demonstrations through the Play Store. My app is for anyone who installs APKs outside of the Play Store. And in particular, I'm a huge fan of APK Mirror by the fine folks at Android Police. It's a site where you can go and you can find it. It's kind of like an alternate source for finding APKs legally. It's fully legal, fully safe. It's done, like I said, by the folks at Android Police who I trust. So it's just a good way, like if, for example, if an app or let's say an app update, like a Google app update comes out, you want to get the latest version of the camera app, and you haven't received that on your phone yet, you could go to APK Mirror and see if somebody else who's already received it has, if they've included it through APK Mirror, and you can install it. So it's really handy. Well, there's now an official APK Mirror installer app. Now, this is not an app that browses the APK Mirror site. You still have to go to apkmirror.com, find the APK that you want to install, and tap to like download that APK. What this does, it's an installer for those APK files. So number one, yes, it'll install an APK file onto your phone, which is basically an app, essentially installing an app from the APK file. It can do that, but you could do that even without this app. It's no big deal. But it also installs app bundles. And if you remember back in 2018, Google introduced bundles. This allowed developers to deliver apps to different phones in different ways. So instead of delivering a single app that covers all the bases, a developer could analyze your phone in order to know the certain specifications of which to tailor the app to fit your phone. So it doesn't have to deliver everything. It only delivers the parts of the app that apply to you. So it reduces the file size, reduces some of the complexity in what you're storing on your phone. It's nice. But it also makes installing those APK bundle files a lot more difficult. And so what this app does is those bundles can be found through apkmirror.com, and when you find one, it makes it really easy to install it. You download that file, and then when you use APK Mirror installer on your phone, it actually recognizes that it's a bundle and gives you all of the individual items within that bundle as little checkboxes that you can mark and say, yes, I want the English version, or yes, I want this language version, or yes, I need this particular file. It also detects the configuration of that bundle that is ideal for your device. So it's smart enough to know this is what you need, but if you want more, you can do that, and you can check those boxes and everything. So it makes it easy to install those, and they did a really great job. Now, it is ad supported for free, so if you want to get this, you can. There's ads in the experience, a little banner ad down at the bottom, and then I also noticed when I wanted to install, I had to watch a video in order to install it. This is to pay for it. They've been working really hard on this. I know for like the past year, I think they said in a post. So this is how they pay the bills. Or you can pay. There's a subscription model that you can pay inside the app, and of course you get more months if you buy a year upfront instead of month to month. So you can take a look at your options. But there is a free model that you can do. It's just ad supported, and you should check it out. APK Mirror installer really neat what they've been able to put together, and it's done really well. As you can imagine, they kind of know a thing or two about Android. So APK Mirror Installer is the name of that app. It's an early access app. Check it out.
I love the irony that it's in the Google Play Store.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that cool? But I mean, it's it's an installer app. It's not another store.
It's not a store
itself.
Yeah, exactly.
In and of itself, it's a tool to install APKs with. But it happens to work really nicely with APK Mirror. So there you go. All right, so that's my app. Yeah.
Before we move on, we have a little bit of breaking news, Victor.
Oh, do we? Do we have the breaking news bumper? Like the vanilla one? I don't know either. Maybe not.
Putting Victor
on the toes. No, I don't have it ready.
We're at the shot.
Oh, well. All right, Victor, can you say breaking news then in some dramatic way?
Breaking news.
There we go. All right.
We have a correction in the arena stats. Ant actually has 17 points, not 16. Wade County was eating and did the math wrong. So, so there you go. So good job, Ant. And that's a great segue to your app.
All right. Well, mine is Brain It On. No, that's not my southern drawl you hear. It's literally Brain It On. And this is a puzzle app. Played around with this over the last couple of days since we're locked in at the house. If I want to get away from the desk and the camera, I just go out to the porch and pull this app up and just start plucking away at different physics puzzles. What it is you draw on the screen to try to figure out how to solve the different puzzles. They start out pretty simple, like what we're showing now. This is actually a screencast of me playing. It gives you an instructions to say, like, move a object across the screen just by drawing something. And it's pretty simple and straightforward. It gets a little bit more challenging around level 6 or so, where you have to move spheres across the screen or move balls around and things like that. And you're having to do this just by drawing a particular line or a shape, and that shape will fall on the bottom of the screen, and the physics of that fall will make other things happen, whether it's tilting over an object or moving an object around. So it takes a little bit of brain power to figure out the best scenario to make things move around. And if you're watching on the screen, you're going to see where I struggle quite mightily. I mean, look, it's telling me to put these two little spheres inside this little so-called glass. And it took me a minute to figure out how to do it. What would you do if this was you trying to figure out how to move these down to the lower part of the screen? What would you do?
I think I probably would have done that right there that you're doing right now. Put the line in between.
Watch what happens.
But I know it doesn't seem to work. Well, you got one in at least that time.
Got one. So it's a little bit of trial and error, and you get more points based on the amount of time it takes for you to achieve the goal, as well as how many things you draw to make it happen. There's a couple points where if you have to put it, say, inside of an object or what have you, it makes it'll leave a timer on the screen just in case physics continues to take over and they happen to like bounce out of the object or roll out of the object. So it'll put on the screen 3 seconds to make sure you actually complete the job. So it's pretty slick app. It's free. It's called Brain It On. And it's really, really good for just chilling out on the porch while you're on social distancing and staying safe at your house.
I love it. I love that you finally got that too. I was like watching just so closely, like, come on, tip over the edge. You got it there at the very end. Good work. I love it. Brain It On is the name of the game. Brain It On physics puzzles. Very cool stuff. Thank you, Ann. Oh, and it's Play Pass, so that's good too. All right, Andrew, what you got?
Okay, I was very surprised that this one hadn't been picked, but it's also something that I recommend to people all the time and they haven't heard of it. It's a password manager that is not one of the big names. It's called NPass Password Manager. I recommend it because I've been using it since it was in beta, before it was even in the Play Store. I think it's up to several million installs at this point, something like that. But it's not one of the big names. And I initially liked it because it was a purchase once rather than a subscription model, and so you could purchase it once but still get cross-device syncing. And they now have two options. You can pay as like $1 a month or $2 a month, like most of the competition, or you can buy it outright for $40. And what I like about it is you can it encrypts all of your vault, all of your passwords and your information, but then you choose where to keep it. So you can keep it locally on your device if you don't want a cloud involved at all, if you're very paranoid about that sort of thing. I know some people are. Or you can store it in Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive or whatever you want. So you have your own storage involved. And so you keep the keys no matter what. And so, of course, that means that there's no support, there's no help there. If you're locked out of your account, it's on you. So that's kind of a downside. And but that's what I liked about it was I bought it one time and then that's it. I own it. I own the license to the software, and I can still get something that syncs seamlessly between all of my devices. So they have desktop clients, and then the Android app is really good. It's a small development team. I'm not sure if it's just one person or a few people, but they're very responsive to feedback, and they were really early to support, like when Samsung did their own fingerprint sensor with a separate API, like they supported it right away. When Google came out with Face Unlock on the Pixel, they supported it right away. And so they're very nimble like that, and they updated to support autofill on Android, et cetera, et cetera. So they do a lot of very quick development, and they get the stuff out there while keeping it secure and really simple. Now, it's not maybe the flashiest password manager out there, but it's just been rock solid for me for years and years and years. And like I said, I paid for it once and that was it. So some people want to hold the keys and want to, do their own thing and don't necessarily trust having that data shared or saved somewhere else. And this is the password manager for you. And it's $40 and you get it for all platforms. They don't nickel and dime you to get a Windows version or a Mac version or anything like that.
That is awesome. This is definitely a solution for some people. Obviously there's a lot of different ways to go about this sort of thing, but being able to hold on to the keys, I love it.
I definitely, I'm not going to recommend it to my mom, because, she may be more willing or more likely to forget a password or set up a new phone and forget that, it's installed in another phone or something like that. There are managed solutions that are way better for that and, end up charging you more as well as a result. But it's just good. I'm really glad whenever we do an update, we keep like a running list of best password managers. And, you have your 1Password and your LastPass and, Keeper and all these other ones. I always like to throw in one that's a purchase once, use everywhere option, because, in this world where we're all paying a million subscriptions, and we're getting, $5 here, $10 there, and all of a sudden, we're paying so much money every month in subscriptions. It's really nice to just have a piece of software that you just buy and that's what you have. It's a very old school model now, and people aren't used to paying $40 for an app. And I understand that that's like kind of an issue. But the fact that you can just buy it and have it, and it's completely tied to your Google account, they do all the billing all properly through Google Play, is really, really nice. So you can restore it any number of times and any number of devices. They don't lock you out with any kind of, timers or device limits or anything like that. They're very consumer friendly.
Nice. And once again, Play Pass. This is available in Play Pass. So if you happen to subscribe to Play Pass.
That's like a good example of this developer is just like in on every new thing that comes out. They're just into it. They're not trying to do their own separate thing, their own weird business model or anything like that. It's very, by the book, I guess you'd say, as far as the Play Store and Android goes.
Right on. NPass, ENPASS. NPass Password Manager is the name of that app. Great pick. I'm surprised that wasn't in there too. Yeah. Good stuff. All right, Ron, what you got?
Yeah. So I remember at the end of the year.
Oh, we got breaking news. We finally figured it out.
Well, I just wanted to say I found it.
There you go. Breaking news. Victor's doing his job.
Now we know where it's at. Now we'll have it for the future, at least.
I love it.
All right, cool. So breaking news. I've got a productivity app. Crazy, I know. At the end of the year, when we did our category, when whoever did the analysis of our categories of apps and stuff like that, this is made me think of that when I played with this app and decided to bring it to the arena. But as always, I'm on the lookout for good productivity and to-do list apps and things that help you get work done. Actually, the developer, some of the folks behind this app got in touch and gave me a heads up about it, which is nice when that happens. So thank you for emailing me. And it's called Tascade, the Unified Workspace Remote Work Tool. And, I thought this was interesting, especially now that we're all kind of, we're at home for obvious reasons and we're working remotely. And depending on what your work is or how you work with other people, we're looking for always good tools to work together. And I'll be honest, I know this might be a little hyperbole, but using this app made me kind of have a little aha moment similar to the first time I played with Slack. Almost in a way that this is like a lower five or, Slack-esque kind of app. And basically it is collaborative workspaces that you can invite people to and have shared task lists and to-do lists. And they have some neat bells and whistles as well in that they have, you can write notes to one another and you've got video chat if you want. There's a desktop version that syncs with the app so you can go to the web and keep track of your projects and all stuff like that, which is pretty cool. But at the end of the day, if you're doing anything from your day job, working in a work team, or planning a vacation with your family, or working on some sort of project that with someone else and you want to collaborate in a space it's simple and easy to use, Tascade looks like it could be a pretty good contender. It's really nicely designed. It's got a very kind of light and airy kind of feel to it, and really feels kind of fleshed out. And as you go through the screenshots here in the Play Store, you see you've got your kind of standard inbox, and then you can build these workspaces. So, for example, I could build an all about Android workspace and invite Jason and Flo and Ant to it, and we can set to share to-do lists and assign tasks to one another, and set priorities and leave notes for one another, and actually have inline chat related to those. So I feel like there's a whole segment of work, like for me, for my day job and for my several other jobs that I have, we have dedicated Slack instances and we've got channels and chat because those are people that I'm in contact with all the time. But then I've got a ton of one-off projects that that you're just working on. When you need to spin up a quick workplace that everyone can access, Tascade looks to be like a pretty good solution. And then when you finish the project, you just move on, which is kind of nice and nimble in that regard. So Tascade, pretty cool. Remote virtual team collaboration. And they've got a whole, you can add tags and you can assign projects to different team members and and all that fun stuff. They, in their latest version, they added templates, and you can delegate tasks and all that fun stuff. So, it's a really well designed app to help you be more productive, especially when you're at home. So get your projects loaded, have a nimble, a kind of collaborative to-do list, more than a to-do list app that you can sync with the desktop as well. So pretty cool. Tascade, it's free in the Google Play Store. Definitely worth checking out.
Right on. Tascade, the Unified Workspace Remote Work Tool. That is a really good name, actually.
It's a good name, yeah.
They locked it in. Tascade. Let's see here. Okay, so twit.to/AAA poll 465 is where you can go to place your vote for your favorite app this week. Twit.to/AAA poll 465 is your favorite app. APK Mirror Installer, Brain It On, NPass Password Manager, and Tascade. 4 awesome apps, if I do say so myself, this week. Place your vote like Victor is about to do. Where's he going? Where's he going? Oh, the torture.
Oh, wow.
Cascade.
All right.
I don't know. I got a Victor vote last week too. Maybe that bodes well for me here.
Maybe so. We'll see how that rounds out next week on the show.
Curses.
Well,
curses.
I could probably use the productivity list for what apps I want to use. Well, for what apps I want to install on my phone using.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Thank you so much for watching and listening each and every week. And we do appreciate you. We also appreciate you, Andrew, for showing up tonight and being on the show. And I can't believe it's been as long as it has. Please let's have you back sooner, because that was just far too long.
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully, when I come back on, you guys will be back in the studio, as many of you as possible, at least Jason and Ant. But yeah, it was fantastic as always. It was great being
on. Right on, man. Andrew Martonik, of course, AndroidCentral.com. You're working on anything? Well, I guess you're working on the phone review, of course. You have anything else that you want to tell people about?
The V60 review in its entirety, including a separate video review, is going to be out like Thursday, Friday this week. So that'll be right as everybody's listening to this if they want to learn more about that. We're also running a little package of things to try to get people's mind off of, some of the craziness happening in the world. That's all talking about foldables, kind of the deeper dive into how the devices work and, where we see the industry heading as we go from regular phones over to foldables. So you'll see all that over at AndroidCentral.com.
Right on. AndroidCentral.com. Thank you again, Andrew. Let's see here. Ant, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to plug?
Well, I always want to talk about hands-on photography. Always.
I knew it.
TV/hop for hands-on photography. That is my weekly show where I'm going to show you how to get the most out of your camera, as well as share some tips and tricks in post-processing. Last 2 episodes was a 2-part series where I talked about gradients and color gradients and how I use the color gradient tool to do some of my photo retouching. And if you want to look at last week's, we had a nice special model that was on display there. That is Miss Queen Pruitt doing her thing, making me look like an overachiever. And I just did some touch up on her image there, just using color gradients. And it's a pretty slick tool. So check it out. That's twit.tv/hop.
Right on, Ann. Thank you so much, man. And Ron, what about you? What's new?
Yeah, not much new. Just in the coal mines of working at home. So an adventure, especially with 2 little ones at my knees all day while I'm trying to get work done. But it's I love the time.
I have nothing to complain about. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's actually interesting. So I wanted to plug. I put the link in the chat room. Actually, my wife got interviewed by CNN to talk about how we're dealing with the new state of the world. And there was an article about how marriages can survive this current state. And if you scroll down, Victor, to the what is it? Embrace something. I think it was Embrace, not Embrace Space. Keep scrolling. Sorry, I forgot. Establish routines. That's what it is. That's our section. Yeah. And there you can see right there in New York City. Explain that that we're scheduling calls around during naps and we'll take the babies out for a walk if one of us has another call and need to work, and I try not to I stop working while they're eating so we can all chip in.
That's awesome, dude.
And we keep supporting one another and giving each other high fives. And what's great is that if you scroll down just a little more, she did include that little bit of key information, which is we still bicker. But we know that it's not that it has nothing to do with how we feel about each other and the family and all fun stuff like that. So we're making it work. We're in just under 600 square feet of an apartment, and both have jobs and twins. So definitely making it work. And I'm loving the time I'm spending with the babies. So it's definitely it's a blessing in disguise. So yeah. So
Dang,
and technology helps. Technology helps a lot too. So.
You're making me feel bad as I sit here in my home office and the door is closed shut. It's not even cracked. It's closed.
Well, I couldn't do this. I mean, the only way we're doing this now is that they're asleep in the other room, and luckily with the white noise machine, I've got some coverage, and we just installed this new wall here, so I can actually have some barrier. But
what's going on? Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't know if you saw on my Instagram story, but we got a new piece of furniture. We got and it basically separated the apartment into 2 rooms. And I've got a little more space, which is nice. But if this was 6 hours earlier, I'm not doing the show because they are screaming and crawling and touching everything. I had to pack up my records the other day because they were within arm's reach, and my son kept on pulling records just off the shelf, and which is great that he's into records, and when he's older we'll listen to them. But now be careful with dad's vinyl. So
look, those are dad's records. Okay, so hands off until you know how to use them appropriately.
Yeah, no, but I will say that we have a 1 bedroom and the babies are in the bedroom, and so we'll bounce between I'll take the babies in that room while my wife is out here on a call, or vice versa. And I will say, just being able to just be in the room with them and be present with them, but also have my phone in my pocket in case an emergency comes up, and be able to respond to a Slack or see an email, like it just goes a long way. Like if we didn't have all these ways to stay in touch, that this could not have be happening. So it's totally. Like if this happened 20 years ago, I'm just not working, and that's not good, because we got to put food in the mouth. So yeah,
absolutely. It's a crazy world right now, but we're all getting through it. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Victor, for finally finding the breaking news bumper. I know that was hidden for a while.
No problem. Yeah, I'm always ready.
Next time you'll be totally ready. Thank you for coming in and doing this.
If I can say something about one of the earlier stories about Zoom, I would actually give it a higher rating than that. When earlier this week I saw my son using it with his teacher, and almost all of his class was on there, and the teacher was still able to control it and mute everybody and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, this is actually working. So
pretty impressive tool.
But then again, it's like what we do here. I don't know if that would be as impressive to others, right? But
yeah,
true.
Well, different scale,
be impressed.
Yeah, absolutely. They should be. Thank you, Victor. You can find me all across the TWiT network doing shows from my master bedroom in the corner over here. Have twit.tv/HOA for Hands on Android. Last week's episode was about setting up gamepads to work with your Android device, gamepads from the major consoles. This week, this Thursday, there's going to be an episode focused on Android 11 Developer Preview 2. So I'm going to show off some of the things that we talked about tonight in greater detail. But that's Hands on Android. And of course, Tech News Weekly, twit.tv/TNW with Micah Sargent. We've got a great episode cooking for this Thursday. Of note, I should let you all know, big news. Next week, we have the return of Florence Ion. Flo's coming out of baby retirement to rejoin the show on a weekly basis, and we'll welcome her back next week, and we cannot wait to have her back on the show. So I think next week is going to be the 4 of us. It's going to be me, Ron, and Flo, and we'll have a good time then. So that is it for this week. We publish this show every Tuesday evening. If you go to twit.tv/AAA, you can check out the show, find all the subscribe links to the audio format, video format. All of our episodes are listed there, so you can dive in and fill your time reliving the history of Android through All About Android. That's all there is to it. Go subscribe. Find us on YouTube. Do whatever you need to do. We just want you coming back each and every week for another episode of All About Android. We'll see you next week. Take care of everybody. Bye.
Later.
Bye.